No one has ever
This meeting is being recorded.
no one has ever muted Bill Chalberg. So that's we love you, Bill. All right, hey, good to see everybody. Thank you, Maggie. Really enjoy these updates, the casual nature, and I just have a few things I wanted to share with folks this morning. And I wanted to start kind of on a down note. Maybe some of you have seen that Right Illinois recently lost a board member due to traffic violence. He was struck and killed while biking with his wife on Father's Day. So we're kind of figuring out how to. His name's Ramon Escapa. Trying to figure out how to honor him, work with the family. It was in a rural area. It's like everything that those of you that ride in the city, like it was different, but he was doing everything he should have been doing. So that it's just been every traffic death, of course, is tragic, and this one certainly hit Right Illinois closely. So just wanted to share that. He was a wonderful guy, and he's going to be dearly missed. Just to jump in a few updates here. So we had a social media campaign that ran through late April through early June. We have the intent of putting together a collection of some of the comments that we received. I don't know that any of them would surprise you all, but I think we can use that as fuel to continue our efforts to make biking and walking safe and accessible. Some of them are quite colorful. And then another quick update, our bike safety quiz mini grant program, which has been going on since 2018. We are nearing our goal of 50,000 students for the fiscal year, which goes through September 30th, which is cool. It'll be the third year in a row we've hit the goal, and we keep increasing that. And Carlos, I see you're on there. So IDOT funds that and has been gracious in giving us additional funding for that campaign. So hoping to hit that here in the next month or so. A few events or things that you all can get involved in might be of interest. And Maggie, you see, I actually put links in the email I sent you, so I don't have to send a follow-up. We're continuing our monthly bicycle-friendly driver course, and Elizabeth, who's on this call, is one of the presenters for next Thursday's course. It's via Zoom. We're actually advertising. We purchased some ads on social media, hoping to reach a bigger audience. And certainly, while we love you all and those who've attended, we're hoping to kind of branch out and cast a wider net and reach more people to take that free course. So that's next Thursday at 7. We have something that's kind of fun, a bit of an encouragement or incentive for you. It's called the Drive Less, Bike More Challenge. If you're members or followers of League of American Bicyclists, you've probably seen some of the information about this campaign from their correspondence. The idea is we want people to change the mode. It's a mode shift, to change the way they get around. And so League of American Bicyclists has set a goal of 2 million transportation miles by the end of the year. They were kind enough to invite Illinois into the fold with 4 other states, and we have a goal of 10,000 transportation miles by the end of September. It's all run through the Love to Ride app. So if you're on that and you can log your transportation miles, that would help us reach that goal. We're just shy of 2,000 miles as of earlier today. So I don't think I think we'll easily hit the goal. But at the same time, if we can enact and encourage some of that behavior change that will hopefully last, we see that as a win. And then those of you, you're local, you're in your communities. For the second year, we're doing promoting an event we call Let's Ride Illinois. The idea behind that is very similar to a Ride of Silence. If you participated in those in the past, we give some resources, some tips. We actually have some upcoming webinars to help individuals plan a casual, family-friendly, fun ride in their community, and then just tell us about it, and we help to get the word out. So it's really easy, very little barrier of entry. I see Chris is on the call. You guys did a scavenger hunt last year in Brookfield. Like, you can have fun with it. invite elected officials, do stop for ice cream, or whatever you think would be fun and of interest to folks in your community. And Maggie will be sharing information on some of these links. That takes place September 9th through 18th. So it's a 10-day period. You just tell us about a ride that you or your organization or your business is doing, and we'll help spread the word. And then lastly, event related, the Illinois Bike Summit is taking place in Champaign. October 12th is the kind of the main event, if you will. If you've been to bike summits in the past, it's a series of workshops and networking opportunities, keynotes. You have a couple mobile workshops this year. The content, the sessions, and the presentations are all in the works. The registration is open now. And then on the 13th is a professional training. Carlos has helped in the past. We've got someone else from IDOT who's going to be helping. Steve Letsky, Tim Gustafson from Epstein is going to be there. And so that's an opportunity for engineers and planners and municipal staff to go through a little bit of training. They get their continued maintenance hours and things like that. So you as advocates, more than likely, or the most relevant aspect of the summit is going to be the Wednesday, October 12th in Champaign. And then just a couple other things here. We have been talking, and I can't remember, Maggie, if you were going to mention any of this, but we're in talks with Active Trans and Audrey at MPC. I sat on an Illinois Environmental Council meeting this morning about 2023 legislative priorities. Some that are rising to the top, though you can't necessarily hold us to this because it's still in discussion, is an e-bike incentive program for Illinois, updating the complete streets law for the state, and then anything related to vulnerable road user legislation, which would offer some safety, security to those that are not encased in steel. So we'll see where that leads, but I suspect we'll be hitting on one or two of those as a coalition, in which case we will need your help, right, to spread the word, to contact elected officials and that next year. And then let's see a couple other things. There's a cool, relatively new app out there called Points. It's Pointz. They bill themselves as ways for bicyclists. So if you're looking to try something new to help navigate, whether in your community or on a trip by bike, check out the Points app. It's developed by a couple college students. Happened to meet them at the National Bike Summit in March. And Maggie, I'll be following up with Active Trans because they're hoping to kind of boost some of the data that helps in the routing. But it seems like a pretty neat app. I've used it a few times, and if you like to geek out with Points. And the last thing I'll mention, the Great American Rail Trail, which is an initiative that's being pushed by the Rails to Trails Conservancy. We've had some conversations, some email exchange, some planning, strategy sessions. Maggie's been involved as well about how to close the 4 gaps. So from Lansing in the far east to the Quad Cities, if you're familiar, the I&M Canal Trail and the Hennepin Canal Trail, there are 4 current gaps in that network, including a pretty big one, about 16 miles in LaSalle, Peru. So it's interesting conversation, trying to have creative strategy discussions about funding, about engineering, and the challenge that Rails to Trails kind of posed to Illinois is, hey, you guys can be the first state that has a contiguous connected section of their larger trails network, which I think runs from Pennsylvania all the way across the coast. So some cool stuff going on, some encouraging that you all can get involved in, some events we'd love to see at as well. And with that, I'll pass it back to Maggie, and maybe if you have questions, maybe the best thing to do is chat, since I know we've got some special guests today.
Great, thanks, Dave. So let's see, a couple quick updates from me, and then we'll get Edith and Audrey started. So one is Bike the Drive is coming up. That's Active Trans's big fundraiser of the year, and September 4th. And it's starting a little later this year, so that makes it a little easier to get into the city. It starts at 6:30, I believe. But if you'd like to participate, we'd love to have you. And we're also looking for volunteers. The event, we need, every year we need 400 volunteers to actually run the event. So if you're interested, I have lots of information for you and can connect you to our events team. But if you've never done it before, we'd love to have you join. It's a fun experience to see so many people biking in one space on the road. And then another update, just I know you've probably heard me talk about it before, but the ITEP grant, the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program grant, is opening August 1st. So it goes August 1st to September 30th. So it's open for 2 months. It's our state's largest funding opportunity for walking, biking, and trails. So just make sure, I would just keep bugging your village staff or city staff and make sure they're applying. And really, like, they can get started now. I think putting an application together, and we've got an event series, and it just kicked off on Wednesday. So there's lots of information out there on how to apply. We were working with IDOT. It's an IDOT grant. So they're very much available to help answer questions too. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And then I also wanted to quickly highlight. So I know that we'll briefly talk about this with Edith and Audrey, but we were earlier this week. So Edith, through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, she organized an event with their environmental committee, and it was about this. A large portion of the meeting was about Move with the Mayors. And have any of you heard of this before? Just curious. You can like shake your head or. So Move with the Mayors. Edith kind of connected us to the organizers behind this, and it's a national group. They just encourage mayors to get residents active and walk with residents, bike with residents, do yoga with residents. And it's in September, they're going to have a challenge. So a Move with the Mayors challenge, it's a 2-month challenge. And it's everyone in the community can count their movement, their miles or their steps. And then you compete with other cities. So it's kind of a fun challenge to be involved in. And so in Illinois, Edith, are there 9 mayors that participate in the challenge? Is that right?
We're still signing up.
Okay.
And we were promoting this last year. The DuPage County, the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference, the leading mayor of West Chicago, Mayor Ruben Pineda, challenged his colleagues in the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference, and we had 6. Ohio has 8 or 9, so we're trying to push a little bit. I'll put it in the chat for sign up. And there was a deadline of the end of July, I think, for communities that wanted to get access to an app, and it comes with really good support for promoting it in the community. So that's one of the earlier deadlines. And
it's free. It's they give you a toolkit with social media information, messaging, press releases, posters, and the tracker is all like part of the package. So it's just a fun program. The Mayor Pineda, who Edith just mentioned from West Chicago, he spoke about his experience doing it, and he's been doing it for several years now. And he has a wellness walk with every elementary school, or really, I think maybe he said every school in West Chicago. And he does yoga on the lawn at the library. He does walking meetings throughout the spring and summer. So it's not just the challenge, it's like a full year, like just getting people moving. And he said he lost 30 pounds since getting started with the Move with the Mayors initiative. So I don't know, it's really cool program. So I encourage you to share with your mayor or village manager, your local leaders, to get them participating. So yes, so that's all for me for updates. So I think we'll turn it over to Audrey and Edith. And we've got a presentation that Audrey's running. And then some discussion questions for all of you. And then afterwards, we can open it up to other questions or things anyone else wants to share. But Audrey and Edith, would you like to take over?
Sure. Let's do quick introductions of ourselves, Audrey, and then I'll start talking. So I'm Edith Macker. I'm Environment Director for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. And some of you I see are municipal staff, but if you don't know us, we're a regional council of governments. We were created by Mayor Daley to foster cooperation in the suburban region, and we're 21 years old. And the councils of governments are COGS. I mentioned DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. There are 9 of them in the Chicago region that are more geographically focused, like Lake County Municipal League, Will County Municipal League, and we're umbrella to all of them. And at our level, we have the ability to have dedicated staff on different programs. There's only 5 of us, so we're still really small. But so that's the environment program that I provide, and it provides in many ways like sustainability support for municipalities that don't have their own sustainability staff. So that's who we are.
Hi, I'm Audrey Wenink, and I work with the Metropolitan Planning Council as the Director of Transportation Policy. If you're not aware of MPC, we're a regional nonprofit research and policy and advocacy organization. We've been around a long time. It's 87 years now. And we work, as I said, at the regional level, trying to advance good urban planning policy. So we have a sustainable and equitable region. And I focus on the transportation dimensions of that, but there are also folks at my organization that focus on environment and land use and housing and things like that. So we try to think of all those intersections. So I'm going to advance the slides, Edith, and then we'll get to our section at the end.
Sure. And so on the cover slide there, just pausing a little bit on the cover. And so as I said, we provide at our level, working across the region, services that municipalities can really lock onto and be a part of and supportive of without having to do it themselves. So in our region, we are now up to 7 sustainability directors in my 275 member municipalities, which is up 30%, but we only have a handful of climate action plans at the municipal level. Chicago just finished theirs after it lying dormant since 2008. And Highland Park is working on a sustainability plan. I know Skokie is, I see you on the call here. But for the most part, municipalities don't have their own climate action plan. And so this is talking about a climate action plan for the region. And so next slide, please. And I'll talk about background and context for what the plan is, how it was put together. I'll give you an overview of what the plan actually looks like in terms of goals, targets, objectives, and the strategies and how that's arranged. Talk about how we engage with municipalities in supporting the CAP. And then specifically, the connection here is to how we're implementing a particular objective in the plan, which is reducing vehicle miles traveled. And so the foundation for our climate action plan, thank you for putting your municipality in your in the chat. I'm very interested in who's here from the suburbs. This is fundamental to how we approach the region, and this preceded our climate action plan. In 2016, I created the Greenest Region Compact, an update of the Greenest Region Compact that the Mayor's Caucus had for a number of years, and created a template pledge. Came up with what I call consensus goals, and there's very high level goals. Put the compact out as a political statement, offering municipalities an opportunity to say, we support these goals. There are goals in there related to sustainable transportation and energy and community livability and all kinds of sensible things that municipalities can do. And should support. And we now have 142 local governments, which is the largest regional sustainability collaborative in the country. We're really proud of that. All of our sub-regional councils of governments have also supported it, as well as 4 counties have come on board with it. The Greenest Region Compact comes with a framework, which is a very practical spreadsheet of strategies to enable municipal sustainability planning. It's kind of a do-it-yourself tool. Again, very popular. And then the third piece of that is collaboration to achieve goals. And so that's where we move ahead and get things started and try to work on these goals. And the climate action plan actually is one of those regional collaborations on our GRC goals. Next slide. And that Greenest Region Compact Collaborative and the opportunity that we had to work on the climate action plan actually looks at the role of local governments in creating action on climate and moving forward towards global goals. Local governments, as you know, are advocates. I hope you're, and some of you are on commissions or work for municipalities. It's the closest jurisdiction to residents that we have the best dialogue with residents and the most access, particularly in a suburban community where municipal leadership is very accessible. When we unite across the region, then we become an opportunity to really drive action at a higher level for global impacts is where we're aiming with this. So there was a real argument and a real value in having us unite as a pilot region to do this regional climate action planning. And that collaboration, the Greenest Region Compact, this regional approach, was the reason that we both wanted to be a part of this and were selected and to pioneer regional climate planning in the United States. So just in 2019, there was a call for projects that was supported by the European Union, which has a project called Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, has 10,000 mayors around the globe that are involved in climate action and using the same approach to climate action. You can see on the global map, the green dots are the communities, the municipalities that are part of Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. The yellow parts, the yellow dots on the global map are regions of the world that are united on climate planning and climate action. There were none in the US. And so there was an invitation to United Regions to be a part of this pilot project. And we submitted and were selected as one of 4 pilot regions, along with Kansas City and Washington, Metro Washington area. Denver dropped out of the project actually, and then the Twin Cities and Minneapolis joined later. So there's only 3 projects that were finished, and ours was the last to be done and the largest. Next slide. We did get technical support from the European Union and the Global Covenant of Mayors. No additional funding, but it was great to be part of that mentorship. So the regional approach looks at regional 2 sources of data and two approaches. First is the regional challenge of greenhouse gas emissions. And we used a greenhouse gas inventory, which really measures energy used across different sectors. And so stationary energy, you'll see the blue and the green parts of the pie chart together, are building energy and energy generation. That's the largest source of emissions that we have. They were separated out by electricity and natural gas. And then almost 29% is where transportation emissions come in. This is specific for our region. And we often get challenged because the regional data for greenhouse gas emissions doesn't comport with what you see nationally. Ours has a lower transportation proportion or a higher energy generation, depending on how you want to look at that. But this is accurate for the region as the transportation emissions are 29%, 28.8. The second regional challenge is climate risk and vulnerabilities to climate changes. And we have sort of less precise data on this and a little bit more observations. So this is a little bit more of a subjective review of the data in terms of climate risk and vulnerability. And we did what's called a climate risk and vulnerability assessment, looking at not only the threats from climate, high heat, flooding, and drought is the primary threats to our region, but also how that impacts the things we care about, most notably people, vulnerable populations, and then resources and assets that we care about in the region. So that's the foundation for the plan. And the way the plan is put together, just to describe the background graphic on there. So you see that orange line of rising emissions, CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions. Those are addressed through the mitigation portion of the plan. You'll see that the blue line is where emissions don't level off right away. Even if we stop, that line in the middle is meant to be 2021 when action occurs, that the emissions are going to be with us for decades, if not hundreds of years. So we still have to adapt to the changing climate. That's just the reality. And then finally, the plan is rooted in equity, recognizing that not only are vulnerable populations going to be hurt first and worst by impacts of climate change, but there's a real opportunity to address inequity through clean energy and mitigation strategies as well. And the unique part of our plan is that this is tailored for municipal action. Again, we're a coalition of municipalities, and we have to look at both the challenges and the solutions in the context of what our members can do. And so the whole plan is framed around what local governments can do to lead by changing their own operations and looking inward and being, leading by example. The center one on encourage others to take climate action is surprisingly influential. And this is both by incentivizing and encouraging. You think about the Move with the Mayor example that Maggie used, or even asking institutions and businesses to take climate action can be surprisingly powerful. Enact, one is probably the most obvious. This is enact codes and policies that would make for greater resilience and reduce greenhouse gases. So digging in a little bit on the mitigation portion of the plan. So the next slide already. The mitigation is based on, we use the greenhouse gas inventory and put it into a model which projects out what those greenhouse gas emissions will look like over time and with interventions. They are categorized roughly the same way or based on the greenhouse gas inventory, the sources of emissions, as well as strategies to approach them. So if you see the column there with the color code, those are what became the objectives in the climate action plan. The first three are related to the stationary energy, building energy, clean energy policies, and decarbonized energy sources, really the lion's share of emissions. The top three there, the width of the band tells you how influential that particular sector strategies can be. And if you look at, we animate this a little bit with the reduced vehicle miles traveled. So let me describe how this is a wedge, a climate wedge. And you'll see at 2015, the baseline, that's what our greenhouse gas inventory tells us. We have 119 million metric tons of CO2 emissions a year, baseline for it. And then the emissions rise, or that wedge gets bigger over time because the population will continue to grow. And one more animation there. And then what's supposed to happen by 2050 is that those emissions get pushed down to, you hear the term net zero a lot, and we want that line, that bottom line on the graph to go all the way down to zero emissions by 2050. But the science-based modeling told us that we could get to a little bit more than 80%. So we reconcile that on the next slide, but one more animation I think will show us, just to point out what this group is interested in, particularly interested in, is the reducing vehicle miles traveled. And so we'll be focusing in on that component of the emissions reduction strategy. So how we reconcile the science-based target with what we know needs to be done is that we set the climate mitigation goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions, because we know that has to happen. But we have targets, including interim targets, that are tied to years based on how quickly changes in technologies could occur, looking at the greatest emissions reduction in the short term, and by 2030 is we're believing that there could be a 50% reduction in emissions. Could be, and that by 2050, we know that we could get to at least 80. To close that gap, we're looking at new innovations and better modeling to get to net zero. And so the mitigation objectives is, I won't go into all of them in the interest of time, but there are 8 of them, and I do want to point out two. Number 1 and number 8. Number 1 and number 8 are a little bit different. Demonstrate leadership to reduce emissions is things that can't be quantified with a greenhouse gas inventory, but they're essential things for local governments to do, like build capacity, create their own plans, get sustainability staff, join groups and make pledges to get there. The sustain ecosystems to sequester carbon actually works on removing carbon through what is called natural solutions, or using nature and plants. But focusing specifically on Reduce vehicle miles traveled. I also, before we switch slides, will acknowledge decarbonized transportation as our other transportation strategy, which looks at cleaner energy sources for transportation, and the reduced vehicle miles traveled as this group would probably champion. And Audrey has drilled into my head is just driving less, period, and using transit and active transportation. So this, I'm believing, is where you want us to focus on this for the conversation here today. So next slide, this is the format, because this is of time and because of the level of detail, we'll just go through how this is put together. So this is a snapshot of what our strategies look like in the climate action plan, and this will animate. So the objective is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, highlighting strategies there, and there's just 2 of them that are articulated there. These columns here then to the right are interesting. They're guided, meant to guide municipalities in making decisions and prioritizing, both for us as a region and for municipalities individually. So the municipal role, I said that this is where we kind of frame everything around lead, enact, and encourage. The solution status, meaning proven here, this is sort of an assessment of risk. Is this a new emerging technology, or is this one that we know works? So gratifyingly, the active transportation ones are quite proven. And then the combined, the greenhouse gas reduction potential is high. And that's just what puts into words what our pie charts or our wedge charts tell us. Relative cost for a municipality to do these are very rough estimates and not quantified, but more subjective evaluation on cost there. And then the effort required, again, rather subjective. Just as a quick guide to help municipalities make choices. And then additionally, we can't put this on the spreadsheet without having it be too small and hard to read and boring. But every strategy then has ties to the equity consideration, suggestions for partners to work with, and then expected outcomes and what's called co-benefits. And co-benefits are where mitigation and climate adaptation strategies kind of come together and work together. So each strategy in the full plan has those additional considerations articulated. Okay, so I wanted to just get all of these on the slide, even though I'm not going to read them because nobody likes to have the slides read to them, but I can give you a minute to absorb them. And I will say that I cut out the slide here that said how many participants we had engaged in the workshops to create the plan. We had 51 advisors, 270 participants, and 175 organizations. And we are really flattered to have strong advocates, and particularly guidance from MPC and Audrey in providing some input on what these strategies should be. They are gratifyingly vetted against the climate models, but these strategies feel really robust. And I'm hoping that you would agree that active transportation, transit-oriented development, complete streets policies, accessibility, that these are all relevant strategies that we'd like to encourage municipalities to take on. And to the point about this project that we're doing together, helping municipalities actually work on them. So adaptation, I do want to just touch on this only because there is an intersection with the active transportation as well. So next slide on that. It was arranged a little bit differently. As I said, there just isn't a greenhouse gas inventory to look at. The adaptation strategies are tied to the impact that they will have on assets, infrastructure, and people. So the objectives, if you will, a little bit differently, excessive precipitation, flooding and their impact on homes, flooding and its impact on transportation, managing excess precipitation as stormwater and infrastructure and its impacts on infrastructure. On the heat side, we have heat and health. There's an intersection of heat and health and flooding with air quality, flooding, and public health. And finally, the one that stands alone and is the second tier in terms of threats is drought and water supply, which impacts particularly communities that are not tied to Lake Michigan for water supply. And so we are looking for persistent equitable climate adaptation. with interim targets in focusing first on internally on governance for local governments to look at their own strategies for adaptation, collaborating across jurisdictions in the longer term, finally with cohesive, resilient communities as a region in 2050. And this is the way that adaptation objectives are arranged. It's actually prettier in the plan, but I wanted to show you where the intersection of adaptation and active transportation lies here. So, there's equity, of course, baked into it, incorporate equity inclusion into climate and adaptation efforts, but enacting plans and policies focusing on adaptation and resilience. And then if you look particularly at F and G, H, F, and G, those are all specifically related to the resiliency aspect of active transportation, access to transit and connected walkable neighborhoods. And then if you look at the columns on the right, again, those are suggested overlays in terms of the climate risk and vulnerability hazards pairs that I showed on the previous slide. So that's a quick overview of the plan. It's a great document. I hope you get a chance to scan it at least and look at the images and really appreciate the breadth of the input that we had into it and the scope of partnerships that we had to produce it. But now that the plan is launched just about a year ago, with the help of MPC, who hosted our launch event for us, we are looking at next steps right away and supporting municipal engagement and implementation. We did put out a resolution for municipalities to support the goals of the climate action plan, and we have 33 municipalities now that have gotten on board with a formal resolution. We are using and helping municipalities then take the plan and then downscale it for their own actions related to climate. We are planning and working towards an update of the Greenest Region Compact to bring the two documents, the earlier one, Greenest Region Compact, and the Climate Action Plan, into alignment, looking at partnerships for implementation, and then specifically looking regional scale implementation. So how do we as the Mayor's Caucus address the climate action plan and support our municipalities in taking action? And we're really excited and proud to partner with Active Transportation and MPC to specifically focus on reducing vehicle miles traveled. And as Maggie may have said, the three of us are working together, three organizations are working together on implementation. So this is where Audrey takes over. Audrey and Maggie.
Yeah, thanks so much, Edith. It's been a great partnership this year. The three organizations haven't worked together in this way before, and it's been great. And I think we're hopefully really having an impact as we're working to do a program this year, including events and research to elevate bike and pedestrian planning and transit-oriented development. So our goals, have been to reach out to communities and get them to prioritize biking, and walking planning. So many suburbs still really prioritize roads. And so trying to help them understand, especially in this era where a lot of money is coming from the federal government and where additional funds have also come from Rebuild Illinois at the state level a couple of years ago, the extent to which funding is flexible, the myriad benefits you get from investing in biking, walking, and transit, and helping provide technical assistance and information on how to plan, how to fund, and how to implement. We're highlighting not only the climate benefits, but of course that's been the springboard, all the great work that the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus has done in their climate action plan. But really there are so many benefits to biking and walking, which are becoming even more salient, sadly, this year. Safety. We are facing an absolute crisis in terms of biking, walking safety. The numbers of fatalities in the state of Illinois have gone up 22% in 1 year for biking and walking. And over 5 years, it's in the 30s and 40s percentage increase. So safety is a really important piece of this, and also affordability, given price of vehicles has shot up, price of gas is really high. We're trying to have an equity lens on this, and people need affordable transportation options. MPC has also done a lot of work on accessibility, ADA accessibility, having an accessible transportation system, how important sidewalks are in terms of playing a role in access to transit, and just having accessible communities where people can walk and roll and get what they need and not have to drive. And also communities are recognizing that economic competitiveness, that a lot of, especially younger folks, really want to live in communities that are walkable and bikeable, and that makes communities competitive. So we're trying to share information, inspire, maybe a little peer pressure, whatever it takes to get folks to really elevate this. We are doing some comprehensive research. So we realized that there was not any single source in our region that had in one place every single bicycle pedestrian plan in the region. And so we're collaborating on that. We're creating a database where we're going to have a link to every single plan. So you'll be able to look up any municipality and click and go right to their plan. In addition, we're looking at communities' comprehensive plans, whether they have content on biking and walking in those. We're looking at which communities have been successful in accessing the different funding sources that are out there that are targeted towards biking and walking, like the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, the Transportation Alternatives Program, Illinois Transportation Enhancements Program, which Active Trans is working a lot with IDOT on how to help get the word out about applying for those grants. We have run data on what is the mode share. So what percentage of people are walking and biking in different communities. There's also relatively new data that CMAP developed in terms of the completeness of the sidewalk network. So we're trying to really do a snapshot, and we'll be able to let people see how their communities compare to each other. And we're also talking to councils of governments and councils of mayors in terms of what they're seeing in terms of achievements and barriers. And we're also trying to understand, and we're not going to have a ton of time to talk about this today, but we really want to understand what are the things that are holding you back. Is it culture? Is it political will? Is it not knowing how to apply for grants? Is it issues with engineering? Is it state policies? What is it? We want to try to help you. So even beyond this conversation, please do think of us as partners and feel free to reach out to us. We have an event series that I hope some of you have heard about and attended. 3 events are in the past, but they're recorded. They are on MPC's website, and I'm going to drop a link to that page in the chat.
I just added it.
Oh, great. Okay. So you can see those videos. You can also register for the August 12th walking tour of Brookfield, where we are going to be gathering in person to look at infrastructure together, hear from officials in that community, and have make it almost a full day of it out there and get free lunch.
Chris will be there too.
Yes, Chris will be there. He's a great partner. And there's even going to be an optional bike element at the end if there's space. So there's 2, and then in October, we're going to be doing an event on ADA transition plans, because Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning is standing up a whole division on that. And we're going to talk about that. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Maggie.
All right. Thanks, Audrey. So just really briefly, like, these are a lot of things that many of you have heard us talk about in the past, and this is part of our training through the Bike Walk Everytown program, but just encouraging your community to, if you haven't already, adopting a complete streets policy, developing a bicycle pedestrian plan or updating your plan, allocating money for walking, biking, transit. There are a number of communities that put local funding towards filling sidewalk gaps or just complete streets. So it's about prioritizing transportation, and it often requires local leadership to do that. And having a commission, so a bicycle pedestrian commission, which a handful of you are on in your communities, but that is a really great group that can really drive implementation and advance the actual building of walking and biking projects. And then looking at your developer design guidelines too. You don't want to miss an opportunity of a building being built in your community and then there are no sidewalks in front of it or no path connecting to the nearby trail. There are a handful of great examples out there in our region of zoning and developer guidelines. Next slide. So Audrey spoke a bit about how we're doing an inventory of policies and plans and all of these different components. So we've just started, MPC put these maps together, but this is the latest map and we know of at least 76 complete streets policies in our region. And next slide. And then regarding active transportation plans, we know of at least 89. And again, some of these are new, recent, some of them are old, and it's recommended that those are updated every 10 years. Next slide. And then for bicycle advisory committees, we know of at least 16, but we'd love to see more of these. It seems like it's a really great tool for a community to have this group who become leaders for, walking and biking. But maybe we should have like a roundtable sometime on like all of you who are involved in one of these commissions and what that looks like. And then this slide just looks at mode share for walking, green being a lot of walking trips, red being lower. And this is data, this is trips. This is not commuting to work, which is what data we've looked at in the past. There's a new tool out there called Replica that tracks cell phone data and looks at all trips. So trips to the shop, trips running an errand, trips going to school. And next slide. And then same, this is Replica data for biking. So you can kind of see the spread of high, medium in the yellow and low biking mode shares. And next slide. And then a handful of other ways you can lead in your community, which all of you are doing in many ways already, but there, you can share messaging, you can organize events. And we always love hearing about all of the creative events all of you are organizing, identifying barriers and reaching out to each other for help overcoming those. And I know we use these calls a lot to kind of share ideas and road widening projects. This is something I'll probably be, Dave and I will probably be talking to you more about, but in our region, we really prioritize building more roads, widening roads, and we're looking at, there's a list every 4 years of like big regional projects that are going to get a lot of funding, and they're mostly road widening projects. And those, it has many implications on greenhouse gas, on safety, on just the cost to maintain these roads in the future. So we're looking at some advocacy around this, and let's look at, can we have regional walking and biking projects, more transit projects, and focus finding ways to make it easier for people to walk, bike, and take transit safely. And then participating in different activities like Move for the Mayor. So I will turn it back over to Edith and Audrey for a quick discussion. I know we don't have too much time, but Audrey or Edith, do you want to take it on?
Yeah,
Audrey.
we have four questions. We know we have very little time right now, but we just want to tease out what I'm going to go through all four of them so you can just see, and then feel free to drop comments on the chat. We want to understand, just how do you feel it's going in your communities? We want to understand what are the things that are going well. We want to understand what are some of the major barriers you're facing. And we want to understand what we can do to help long-term, whether that's, Edith's group that works with leadership in communities and has different structures. There's an H-Friend Communities group, there's an environmental group, there are different structures, whether it's Active Trans that does a lot of on-the-ground technical assistance, and also advocacy, and whether it's MPC that does a lot of research and also advocacy and lobbying. What are the issues that you are facing that you need help with? And we hope, often we hear we need money. But we do want to kind of debunk that and sort of say that there's a lot of money in transportation, and it's really about how we use it. So we're definitely trying to help folks know how to write grants and get the grants that that do exist. But yeah, I see a question or a comment. What does a good bike plan look like? It's recommended they get updated every 10 years. What changes should be included? So that's a great question. I think we might direct you towards our event that we had in April that had focused exactly on this. What should be in a bike plan. Maggie gave a presentation on that. And so there's a recording of that, and that can give you some great background. But I know Maggie would say that just having a bike plan is really important because it tells you what you need to do next. What are the highest priorities? Where are the gaps? Where are the safety problems? And it helps build consensus.
Hey, Audrey, could I just interject real quick?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of the context of the conversation. But anyway, the message was that community should really focus on multimodal plans, bike ped plans. It seems that 10, 15 years ago, bike plans were the big thing. And while people walking benefit from a bike plan, typically, to have a distinct focus on pedestrians as well just makes it, it casts a wider net for the people that live in the community. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Sure. And many of these are considered even now active transportation plans. So it's biking and walking together. So other observations, questions, barriers. So Terry Witt, you noticed right turns on red, crossing multi-use paths from taking that 3-mile trip to the store. Yes, I will note that Cook County is doing a Cook County bike plan right now that a number of us have been involved in, and they're very much focusing on low stress bikeways. So I think there's recognition that even one barrier that's really scary can prevent a less experienced rider. So we're keeping an eye out for that and need to definitely define where those barriers are and try to overcome them. There's an answer here about how municipalities can establish commissions, but I think we heard Maggie make the comment, maybe we should have a roundtable on people that are on commissions, how they get started, what they do, how impactful they are. That's a really good idea. A list of best practices across topics would be great. I think I'll also point you to MPC on our website as we've been doing all these events. We have been trying to create a source of information that is centralized. So if you go to this page, you'll see event information at the top. Scroll down, and we're creating a library. And Active Trans also has a lot of resources on their website. So between our two websites, I think we're trying to create a lot of resources that you can refer to. And Elliot's going to offer to help folks share experiences from Highland Park about developing a local bike walk advisory group. Highland Park is definitely a model for a number of things. Mm-hmm. How do you overcome the city administration's argument that bike ped commission is not needed? Elliot, do you want to speak?
Yeah, not necessarily about that, but okay. I think the connection between a bike plan, a complete streets policy, and a bike walk advisory group is really critical, because what we found is that cities aren't very good at kind of oversight of themselves on things like complete streets. And so it needs to be really driven by some group that's outside of kind of the government itself. And my point about a best practices areas, Maggie has been wonderful in helping us find resources for things like complete streets or bike lane guidance, but it's like pulling teeth to really find best practices. And if certain agencies had a page which was, hey, if you want to see a really good complete streets policy, here's 2 of them. And obviously it depends on the type of community it is. Highland Park's going to be different than Brookfield or Palatine or Chicago. But at least that gets people kind of going in the right direction. And, I think it'd be great to have a list of all the bike walk advisory groups with connecting names so that people could collaborate. If you want to do a community bike ride, what are the things that you need to do that? You can go look at Cycle Brookfield and find a lot of stuff there. But making it easy for communities, and especially people who volunteer like I do, to find those resources is critical.
Thanks. That's helpful feedback. So more case studies that communities can just go to and see which one is most relevant to them, that they can show their elected officials. Dave just put community bike ride guidance. Yeah, Ride Illinois also has lots of resources. How to lead a community bike ride. Best practices are needed. Jurisdiction for roads crosses multiple jurisdictions, and connecting across those jurisdictions and funding is very difficult. We definitely have heard that before. One thing that we're all discussing, I think advocates, is the fact that you don't own roads that go through you. Some of the roads that go through your jurisdiction, IDOT does, or the county does. And potentially pursuing reforms that would allow local communities to have more design control over the roads that go through their jurisdiction. Something we've heard is needed. I think we're just actually a minute over, so maybe we need to stop. I'm sure we could go on a lot longer.
I know. No, thanks for all of the chat comments. There's a lot of good ideas in there, and I'm sure we can continue talking about this when we have our next Suburban Advocacy Call for more ideas that I can make sure to pass along to Audrey and Edith. And as we're developing resources, but I do love the idea of the best practices and almost making sure it's available everywhere on every website, like all of our websites and CMAP's website, your village or city's website. But yeah, thank you so much, Audrey and Edith, for sharing today, being our special guests. And
Thank you.
And thank you, Dave, of course, and thank all of you for being here today, participating. And we'll make sure to organize another one of these in September. Back to yeah.
Would I be able to add some context with regards to IDOT roadways?
Oh, sure. Hey,
So
Carlos. Carlos, go ahead.
This is Carlos Feliciano with IDOT. I'm the District 88 Bicycle Coordinator, among other things. And one thing that I saw in the chat is regards to roadway jurisdictions and advocacy for bicycle and pedestrian accommodations on state highways. And one thing that I often have to respond when advocates try to request for a new sidewalk or a new bike path on a state highway, if you look at IDOT's multi-year program, we have projects, corridor improvements, where if we're adding lanes or widening the roadway, we can include those accommodations, and we often coordinate that with municipalities. But more times than not, our budgets are pretty limited, so we're usually have, if we have a project, it's probably going to be a resurfacing, which we are limited on adding bike and ped accommodations. So oftentimes we will get requests for new sidewalks or bike paths on state highways. And the thing to note and understand about how the state operates is that IDOT does not have a way to install a bike path or a sidewalk on a state highway without an improvement. So 9 times out of 10, those requests, we're going to kick it back to the municipal or reply to the requester saying, you need to reach out to your community for them to propose that installation. And they can either go through the Bureau of Local Roads and Streets if they're using motor fuel tax funding or any federal funding, or some of the ITEP funds, or they can go through the permit process if it's something that is going to be funded directly by the municipality funds. So oftentimes, a lot of advocates will request for these accommodations, and 9 times out of 10, I just have to, break their hearts and let them know that that's not how it works. It's the local municipality, and we even have municipalities responding to citizens saying, that's an IDOT route, so go ask them to install this sidewalk. And I don't know if they do it intentionally just to kind of brush off the request, or if they do it because they're not aware of it. But I just wanted to put some context into those requests for facilities.
Carlos, one question. Because the majority of your projects are resurfacing and not roadway expansion, there'll be less and less roadway expansion in the future. Why can't bike facilities be incorporated as part of a resurfacing?
Because our policy limits the amount of improvements. In order to maximize the state funding that we get for transportation improvements, resurfacings are part of our pavement preservation policy, which limits the improvements from curb edge to curb edge. We do improve curb ramps to comply with ADA accessibility because we are resurfacing through the crosswalks, but it does not include anything outside of the curb. If we start using preservation funding to do accessibility improvements, well, then that kind of defeats the purpose of the preservation side. So it kind of utilizes money intended for maintenance for something that's not maintenance related.
Hey, Carlos, if a road diet is feasible in certain situation, is that an option?
Yes. So if we have a resurfacing and there is an opportunity for a road diet, oftentimes we will put that effort onto the municipality, because a road diet would require changing operations of that roadway, and there's engineering studies that have to be done in order to comply with the federal guidelines for changing the layout of a roadway. As such, if we do have a resurfacing, oftentimes we'll ask the municipality to lead a phase 1 engineering study to evaluate the effects of changing the number of lanes out there and what the repercussions or mitigation strategies are. So oftentimes road diets are perceived as, well, you have a big roadway, just take a lane away. And you gotta understand the effects of what taking that lane away would do to that neighborhood, that community. IDA does have multiple road diets in our multi-year program. I've seen an increase in road diet proposals for safety improvement projects. I have several in my unit that we're working on, and yeah, those locations where we've identified a safety improvement, if a road diet is implemented, IDA would lead that phase 1 engineering study and the public outreach associated with it, and more likely than not, it would involve on-road bicycle facility accommodations.
Carlos, I have a somewhat related question when it comes to resurfacing or repaving projects. Is there the possibility to add a shoulder that makes it more bike friendly? And I'm thinking specifically about what happened on Sheridan Road in Highland Park, where that apparently was never considered, even though there's no shoulder there. And it's very personal to me because I was on a bike ride where our club, the one person got pushed off the road, actually hit by a car, and that person 3 years later is still not able to ride consistently because of that.
Yeah, so adding shoulders is a tricky proposition. So typically in our resurfacings, we would not add any new shoulder.
Right.
And the reason is because adding shoulders will lead to regrading of ditches. So that would trigger us having to look at the drainage, how that additional impervious area would affect the drainage in that community, which would require significant amount of time added to the project in order for that to be evaluated. So with limited resources, shoulders are typically not included with resurfacing improvements. Similar reason as to why we don't include sidewalks and bike paths with resurfacing is because if you are adding shoulders, you're triggering drainage improvements, and that requires extensive coordination.
Yeah, I guess I understand about sidewalks and separate bike paths is a whole different thing, but this is a street that had 0 shoulder to begin with. I know in Lake County has made an effort to, when they do resurfacing projects, to add in, I think it's a 4-foot shoulder, so it's more bike friendly. And they've done that on a lot of the roads that I ride on up there, and it's made a huge difference.
Right. So IDOT has certain corridors where we evaluate whether adding shoulder improvements with the resurfacing are feasible and appropriate, and they're not going to cause any drainage issues. So we have numerous corridors where we've had only resurfacing improvements and we've upgraded to do shoulder stabilization. And those are typically locations that have existing gravel shoulders and relatively flat areas where we can capitalize, remove that gravel shoulder and replace it with asphalt shoulders. So it is becoming a little bit more common for us to look at shoulders as part of these low-hanging fruits for resurfacing, but it is not just a blanket statement that for every resurfacing we look at paving shoulders. So that's kind of how we've been treating it. I think I worked with our designers the last 2 years, and I know we had a list of like 19 resurfacings where we looked at shoulder stabilization and paving gravel shoulders to provide a bicycle accommodation. So we are heading in that direction, but it's not 100% of the projects get looked at that way.
And how impactful is the local community, say Public Works, in terms of influencing, one, you're considering it, and two, you're assessing it?
It always benefits the department when we have a local community that is, has a bike plan, as you guys have been mentioning, has a transition plan, and to reach out to IDOT. Like I said, our project program is listed for public consumption, so any community can look at their corridor, state highway, and see if there's a resurfacing or an improvement that could accommodate bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, and they would be the ones to contact the department asking for, as part of this resurfacing, would you mind looking at shoulder stabilization and include that to provide for bicycle accommodations? And if there's time, then IDOT would look at that location as appropriate. So it goes a long way for the community to be the one requesting that local public works department or engineering department. But the key thing is that we need time because, like I said, oftentimes that will require grading and changes in the drainage, and 9 times out of 10 that oftentimes leads to land acquisition, and there's legal timelines that have to be followed to acquire the land, and it's usually about 2 to 3 year process just for the land acquisition. That doesn't include any of the outreach or any of the coordination with the public to obtain the land.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your comments, Carlos. That's really helpful to understand how you think about that.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. I think we need another roundtable with you too.
Sorry about extending the conversation there.
Oh no, I think this is really valuable information to hear. And thank you, Carlos, for being candid with us about how the process works, because I think it's, in many cases, even many of us who work in the transportation field get confused, and don't quite understand the process. And yeah, we'll have to continue the conversation to keep learning and see if there's ways to see more advancements in state roads that improve walking and biking conditions, if we can work together to figure that out. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for hanging on a little longer than expected. And I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll send out this recording and links. We have lots of links to share, and look forward to talking with you all again soon. And feel free to reach out with any other questions or comments. Okay.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you. Have a good
Good
weekend.
weekend.